We are live. We are live. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Please like, share, and comment. We're having a special edition.
It's a
So
special
a
edition of
special
Black Money
edition.
Matters,
So
and we're excited
we
about
are
this one.
super excited. Thank you for joining Black Money Matters. My name is Jameca Patrick. I am one of your hosts, and I'm here with my co-host,
Me, Karen Weaver. And Jameca, we've been talking about this day, and we've been talking
since
about our special guest since
March,
January.
Oh, it
Martin
was
Luther King Day,
January.
when we met him.
That's right. That's right. So, Mayor, why don't you go ahead and
I'm
introduce
going to
our
introduce
guest?
him, and I'm going to let him tell a little bit about himself. But Edward Buckles Jr., and he is, I'm just going to say, filmmaker. Let me start off by saying filmmaker, because and he's going to tell us a little bit more about himself, but he's a filmmaker. And I understand that you have won some awards as well for filmmaking. But
Yes.
what we are going to talk about is the documentary that he did called Katrina Babies.
Yes.
And we put, and just so
Can,
you know,
can we show it?
ask Mickey if we can
can
show
we
it, because
show-
we put the
can we
trailer
show
up
the
because we
trailer?
wanted people to be able to see this.
Yeah, we did put it up.
Before you came on.
We did put it up.
Can you do that, Mickey? Mickey, we're going to show some of the trailer for people to see Katrina Babies, and then we're going to get in and we're going to jump right into this conversation. It really, really is. And okay, and we can keep talking while this is going on. But
okay,
it was Martin Luther King Day
it
this
was,
year,
and we were in Ann Arbor.
We were in Ann Arbor watching to see the performance. The Water Remembers.
Yep.
And
it was our first time seeing that performance.
Exactly.
And that's where we met him. It's on
and
news media.
We were talking about, when he was introduced, and they talked about this documentary that he had done called Katrina Babies. And we were having that conversation then. And as I was just listening to him, I said, "Oh, we've got to have him come on Black Money Matters so we can talk about this."
Absolutely.
And then I had the opportunity and the pleasure. Oh, we're getting ready to go, Mickey. Okay, we're going to show some of this. You got it?
You got it.
Okay, because I think it's important. And like I said, you all share this and because you don't want to miss it. You don't want to miss it. This is a really, really important, special one.
All over the place. Like, yo, we leaving. Like, yo, like, I'm not asking you, I'm telling you.
Since the storm, it seems like everybody just moved on. In America, especially during disaster, Black children are not even a thought.
Have you ever talked about this before?
No, I haven't.
Why are you that?
I don't know. Nobody didn't really ask me.
Hurricane Katrina caused one of the biggest disbursements of Black people in history.
After losing so much, why wouldn't anyone ask if we were okay? Nobody ever asked the children how they were doing. So I am.
Katrina Babies, take one.
One can't explain.
Friday, I was at school walking the hallways with my friends. By Monday, I was on top of fucking roof.
Everything you consider as part of who you are was reduced to a trash bag.
Am I gonna die? I don't know. I just was like, I'm not supposed to be here.
The New Orleans that we knew was gone. When I got back after Katrina, I naively thought that everything was going to be normal again.
The feel of community in New Orleans is different now.
Your neighborhood was crucial to who you were. What we knew to be true is gone. Think about what that does to a community. It destabilizes it.
I feel like nobody should be that young going through shit like that.
They're at home and they don't feel safe. What does that do to our children? It wreaks havoc on their well-being.
I can't breathe.
Katrina is becoming a folktale, and we're the storytellers.
Resilience is when you still find a way to have your head up and help yourself. Sometimes I feel like resilience is used as a tool because they want people to think, oh no, everything is okay. These people are good, like they're strong. Look at how much they've overcome. It's for me to say when I'm resilient. It's for me to say what is resilient. It's not for you.
Being able to tell my Katrina story has been part of my healing process.
Even if we are resilient, we can never get back what was lost.
Concrete rose, will it grow?
I can't wait to watch the full film.
And you know what? Thank you for coming on. Thank you
Thank
for
you for
coming
having me.
Thank you for sharing your story.
and actually thank you for putting it together.
Thank you.
And you know, even just watching this part of it, I think we in Flint can identify so closely with what, while it was a different experience, you know, how it has left us.
Mhm.
And so, if you could just talk about it, Ed. I mean, you were 13 when this happened.
Yes.
You were
Yes.
13.
Yeah, first of all, thank y'all for having me on. It's an honor to be sitting here talking to y'all. And a funny story about when I first met you all. I was given a keynote at the University of Michigan for Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday, and and I'm not too familiar with Michigan, but I kept telling everybody, you know, at the university, I want to go to Flint. I want to go to Flint. So then Mrs. Gloria Taylor, I guess, no, actually, it's interesting how God works, because she didn't know, she had no clue that I wanted to go to Flint, but she was like, "Hey, I want to take you somewhere after this, and I think that like you'll like it. It's going to be a surprise." And then she took me to the water, what's it called? The Water Remembers. And I was like, yo, this is like exactly, the experience that I wanted to have. I mean, obviously I wanted to actually go to Flint, but I think that going to that,
You can come.
Yeah.
We want you to come to Flint.
We do.
Yeah, like, because there's just so many parallels between what y'all are still going through.
Right.
And like what we're still going through. And I just think that the act of, I guess, like neglect has kind of like taken over both of our cities in a way. So,
And how they leave our communities to perish and fend for ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the main reason that, I wanted to come. So like having that experience with y'all, and now having this conversation is definitely something that I'm, definitely, honored to do. But yeah, I was 13 years old when the storm happened. I was living in New Orleans, and I always say that, growing up in a pre-Katrina and a post-Katrina New Orleans was something that kind of, prepared me to make this film, unintentionally, right? At 13, I wasn't thinking about having to make this movie, but I pulled a lot from that experience. I pulled a lot from being, I guess, neglected and like forgotten after one of the biggest, like disasters, in America. I think that that's where like a lot of the information and the data comes from. It comes from my lived experience. So once I, was fortunate enough to be introduced to the arts and, get into filmmaking, when it came to, what type of project or story that I wanted to tell, Hurricane Katrina was just like a no-brainer, so I was 13 when it happened, and then by the age of 22 is when I actually started to physically work on this film. But I got the idea when I was 20. And it was a 7-year process.
But it was a story that needed to be told.
Oh, absolutely. At first, I would be lying if I said that I knew why, it was a story that, I guess like needed to be told. I definitely thought that I understood the why. And it was like this very, surface level answer. And like, it was still important, but during those 7 years was when I was able to just like unwrap all type of other stuff that, contributed to the why behind making this film. Things from complex trauma to, just like how this was not just a act of climate or like an act of nature. It was an act of racism. It was an act of,
Right.
Right.
resource allocation and like all of those things. So, imagine being, early 20s and, trying to navigate life just as a 20-year-old, Black man, but then also carrying and, finding those things out as you're, carrying like the story of Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans.
Wow.
And
Go ahead,
I
Jameca.
was just gonna say, and just coming into that like understanding, because people will try to make you think or make us think as a society that what happened was an act of nature. It was a tropical storm. It was an act of nature that just happened. Just like they try to make us think that what happened in Flint is just a result of a nation with old infrastructure, just some things, a natural progression of things. But they don't talk about how they disinvest in our communities knowingly, knowing the repercussions, knowing that those levees were going to had a strong possibility of breaking, knowing that they can seep lead and other bacteria that isn't supposed to be there into our water systems. And just being, you say you were 13, being a kid and then just growing up with that. Can you talk about the moment you realized that it was true racism is what occurred?
Yeah. You know, I mean, I had this idea because, um that race had something to do with it, but
Mhm.
I had never dove into it. So let me just kind of, I guess, like contextualize this, because like I'm not trying to say that that I'm like unaware of racism, right?
Right.
But I grew up in a Black city. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? So like, I grew up
Mhm.
around all Black people.
Mhm.
I didn't really go to school with white people.
Mhm.
So, yes, like I experienced racism, but it was more so on like a systemic level.
Right.
And like when you're 13 or a kid, you don't really understand, I guess, like systemic racism, right?
Right.
Because it's
Right.
not as, in your face, it's concealed, right?
Mhm.
So, you know, it was hard for me to grasp that, Hurricane Katrina, which seemed like a natural disaster,
Mhm.
was actually just a vehicle and, a something that, racism could just like capitalize off of.
Mhm.
But it was when I was 13 and when I was laying in his shelter and, Kanye West came on the television screen, and he had the famous line, George Bush doesn't care about Black people, and
Right. I remember that.
yeah,
Mhm.
and like that's a moment that like I remember too. But it still didn't hit right, at that age,
Mhm.
because I remember Kanye West, yes, like that line is famous, but like he said like a whole bunch of other stuff, like he was like, Black people, poor Black people are often to receive help last, right? And when you see white people, taking food, it's because they're hungry and because they'll need food. But whenever you see Black people taking food, it's looting, right?
Mhm.
So I remember hearing those words, and I remember like all of my family members just clapping like in the shelter, like because somebody had said something. But that kind of just it didn't hit in the moment. It wasn't until I got older and once I grew up in this post Katrina New Orleans, and just like life started lifing, right?
Right.
And I became way more aware of, I guess, like racism that was like systemic, like
Right.
racism that's not so much in your face. So I started to think about Hurricane Katrina, and I started to think about the lack of help and like resources that like we had during the storm and after. And then obviously once I started to work on the film, I started to realize, wait, this is not just a natural disaster. This is has everything to do with the lack of resource allocation and
Right.
everything to do with racism. I think that one of the most pivotal moments was just how the children were, dealt with after the storm, including myself. One thing that I can remember being frustrated with, as a kid was, how we were being considered bad, right? And it seemed like rich white kids were, being considered, hurt or sick, and they got therapy, but we were being considered bad and, you know, being deemed as criminals and being like, you know, sent to jail, and nobody ever questioned if Hurricane Katrina had anything to do with how we were acting out in society. But if it was a group of, you know, like, you know, privileged white kids, it would be like, oh, well, you know, those kids are dealing with this. I mean, you know, 9/11 happened, you know, the you know, the school shooting happened, and like people understand how to contextualize those things with, you know, white privileged people. But when it came to us, you know, poor Black people, like it just seemed like they couldn't fathom that Hurricane Katrina had anything to do with the violence and the crime and like the misbehavior that was happening within our lives. So that was something that kind of aggravated me just very early on and led to me making this film.
Well, you know, you made me think about something, because one of the things we've talked about here in Flint is having been poisoned by the water, having loss of life, and much life they don't even want to attribute to the water. You know, they want to minimalize it and say, oh, you know, you had 12 people that died from Legionnaires. We know those aren't the numbers. We know that we had people that died from pneumonia that they're not attributing to it was pneumonia as a result of Legionnaires. We know that women had stillbirths and miscarriages as a result of the water. We know those with compromised immune systems, and the list goes on and on and on. I said, and this was done to us by our government, but no one's been held accountable, because I said, I guess death and damage by water, it gets, you know, it gets swept away. But you said something that it hit me, because you talked about resiliency being used as a tool really against us, because we talk about being strong, we talk about being resilient, and so what has happened to us, right, it doesn't matter because they're strong.
They'll bounce back.
Exactly.
They're resilient.
And so you hear that all the time.
Yeah, and you know, especially in you know, poor Black communities. I mean, you know, and like, you know, disenfranchised communities, you know, Black communities like all over. I think that, first of all, like, let me say, I think that like resilience is something that we should definitely champion. It's something that like we should be, you know, proud that we have. But I don't, like, you know, I said something a while ago that, you know, I don't feel like resilience should be something that like we should be forced to use every single day. It should be something that we have in our pockets,
because
that, you know,
right, when you're forced to use it every single day, it diminishes. You can't keep bouncing back and bouncing back from, you know, one
we get tired.
Another. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, you know, and like that's what I saw happening, you know, in New Orleans. I mean, it's what I see happening in New Orleans. I mean, obviously, we're gonna, you know, remain resilient, but I think that resilience has become something that's, you know, now just a way of life, and you know, it strays away from holding people accountable for putting us in these, you know, compromised, inhumane, you know, circumstances. Like, I don't want to keep being resilient. I want to, you know, be treated equally and fairly, right? So and that's what that line was about. And like, you know, it was about that because every August, you know, Hurricane Katrina happened August 29th of 2005. So every August, you know, national news, local news, you know, makes it a point to get on the news and, you know, show how New Orleans is rebuilt and how the tourism industry is booming. And, you know, they love to see show us second lining and dancing like in the streets and having fun. And then and they always cap it with, you know, look at how strong and like resilient New Orleans is. And it's like
resilient.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, like, you know, we are resilient, but like, you know, can y'all come and help us as well? You know? So
and another thing he pointed out, Jameca, that we always talk about, I always am sure to tell people Flint is not about water and infrastructure. I said those were symptoms of systemic racism.
Yes.
Because first of all, it would not have happened. You wouldn't have switched a water source without testing it before people started drinking it. If you did do something like that, it would have been fixed. And we wouldn't have to fight for everything we've gotten. We had to fight for, and it was the things that we deserved as a result of what happened. But we had to fight for what we deserved, and we're still in that same position, still fighting and not getting the help that we should have gotten as a result of this.
Yeah.
And when you and when you talk about the aftermath, the news videos that come out every year of the dancing and all of that stuff, You really made me think. I got an email last week, and someone said, "Do you know about this?" And I looked at what they sent me, and it was some group that I've never heard of that no kind of partnership with anyone from Flint. They're doing a bus tour. They're going to
Oh
do
wow.
a bus tour, and they're going to come and look at where the sit down strikes happen, because they want to talk about how strong you were pre something, and they want to look at the water plant, and they want to look at the brownfield and all of that. They want to come look at us.
Yes.
And and I was offended by the person who sent it, and they probably had I'm sure they had no ill intent. They know I live in Flint, and so I and it made me think when you were talking. It took me back to that moment and how offended I was and how offended I get when people want to come look at us like we're some fish in a fishbowl or
A
something,
zoo. A
or
zoo, right?
a zoo, and you come
Yeah.
through and you looking, oh, look at them, look at the poor black people. And I thought about it also took me back to a couple of years ago when I was in New Orleans, a couple of years ago around this time actually. And some and I don't remember where we were, but someone wanted to know if we wanted to do like a tour, and I'm like, no, because even though I hadn't gotten this email that I got here yet, I knew and I understood how it felt for people to come through your neighborhood in your community and look at you just to say, "Ooh,
And,
I
Yeah.
and go
saw
back
those,"
and tell a story
and go tell
about
a
you.
story.
Yeah.
I saw that.
And I like that he said, we're going to tell our own story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I-
Yeah.
and-
You know, I think that that's like a really important point, and like it's interesting that like you bring that up because right after the storm, I don't want to get the timing wrong, but
Mhm.
it was soon enough, and like people were rebuilding their homes, people were still finding bodies and pets, and people were still seeing their homes for the first time after the storm, and they
Mhm.
had bus tours happening. Like there were bus tours happening as people are experiencing this like I guess like distraught New Orleans or home for the very first time.
Mhm.
And what does that say? And like this stuff is being broadcasted all over the world. And sometimes I feel like the news is guilty of doing that as well. It's just in a
Absolutely.
it's just
Oh,
it's just in a different
big,
format.
right,
It's not a bus, it's a television, right?
right.
So that's why I wanted to make this film, because I wanted to take our narratives back. I wanted to correct the language. I wanted to correct our experience, and like I wanted people to hear our experience and like where we are now directly from our mouths, so that you can't argue it, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. It's bothersome because it makes me think about, as you're talking, the EPA coming during the we the, we have this settlement, and I won't even get into that because it's so unfair and so unjust, and it doesn't reflect the value of our lives and the damage that was done here in Flint. But they said they wanted to take lessons learned from Flint to other
Mhm.
places, and it's like that's fine and good, but why don't you fix Flint too?
Right now,
Right.
yes.
You all played a role in this, but you have not fixed Flint. You have not helped us at all, but you want to take the lessons learned so this doesn't happen again. And so I get angry when we hear prevent another Flint, but you didn't finish, fixing it. You can never repair the damage that was done, but you can give us what we deserve to have as a result of what was done. I almost want to show the trailer again for people that have joined.
Mhm.
Do you mind if we can we do it again, Mickey? Do you mind
Yeah.
if we do that again? Because there are some people that I see that have joined that I want them to see. Do you all want to see this again? Because I think it's just so
Yeah.
important that they see this. What'd you say,
He
Mickey?
said he needs 30 seconds to set it up.
He said he needs 30 seconds to set it up. But I just think it's important for people to see this because I've seen people jumping in that weren't here at the very beginning.
And while he's setting that up, I want to just remind people go ahead.
Okay, let's watch this one more time. So
All over the place. Like, yo, we leaving. Like, yo, like, I'm not asking you, I'm telling you.
Since the storm, it seems like everybody just moved on. In America, especially during disaster, Black children are not even a thought.
Have you ever talked about this before?
No, I haven't.
Why you think?
I don't know. Nobody not really asked me.
Hurricane Katrina caused one of the biggest disbursements of Black people in history.
After losing so much, why wouldn't anyone ask if we were okay? Nobody ever asked the children how they were doing. So I am.
Katrina babies, take one.
One can't explain, nor can
Friday, I was at school walking the hallways with my friends. By Monday, I was on top of fucking roof.
Everything you consider as part of who you are was reduced to a trash bag.
Am I gonna die? I don't know. I just was like, I'm not supposed to be here.
The New Orleans that we knew was gone. When I got back after Katrina, I naively thought that everything was going to be normal again.
The feel of community in New Orleans is different now.
Your neighborhood was crucial to who you were. What we knew to be true is gone. Think about what that does to a community. It destabilizes it.
Now I feel like nobody should be that young going through shit like that.
They're at home and they don't feel safe. What does that do to our children? It wreaks havoc on their well-being.
I can't breathe.
Katrina is becoming a folktale, and we're the storytellers.
Resilience is when you still find a way to have your head up and help yourself. Sometimes I feel like resilience is used as a tool because they want people to think, oh no, everything is okay. These people are good, they're strong. Look at how much they've overcome. It's for me to say when I'm resilient. It's for me to say what is resilient. It's not for you.
Being able to tell my Katrina story has been part of my healing process.
Even though we are resilient, we can never get back what was lost.
A concrete rose, will it grow?
And
We're back. And so that was the trailer to Katrina Babies.
and it's hard. I mean, it's hard.
It's hard to watch.
And listen,
Yeah.
it really, really is. And
so for those of you who've just joined, we are here today on this special episode of Black Money Matters, and we're with Ed Buckley, and we're talking about his film, Katrina Babies, that will air. Can you tell us when people can watch it?
Oh no! It came out last year, August 24th of 2022, and it's on HBO right now. It's on Max right now, and it.
You know what? I kept seeing the August, and for some reason, I'm thinking August this year.
Yeah.
So I can watch it. I have.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's kind of heart wrenching. Let me just say that. And so when we were in Mississippi, it was at the Adverse Childhood Experiences Conference. And you said one of the things I heard the young lady say is, what it did to her and how no one had asked. And so you were 13 then. That was, and how many years ago was that?
Hurricane Katrina was almost 18 years ago. This August is going to be 18 years.
Wow. And I think what was different, I remember, you could watch it on TV. You could see it on CNN and MSNBC. You could watch it on the national news, but we did not have, these things then.
No.
Where people were, filming and showing you, and you could see the nitty gritty. It was nitty-gritty, but you couldn't really see what if this happened now.
You could see what they showed us.
So what was different? Yeah, because they show you what they want you to see, as opposed to everything that was really happening.
Yeah. I think that was different. As you said, we didn't have these weapons, right?
Exactly.
And and I want to make it very, very clear that it's still happening. Hurricane Katrina was not the last big storm to hit New Orleans, right? It wasn't the last storm to like, impact us. Well, impact all of Louisiana, in a big way. Just last year on the anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Ida hit. And like that was a big storm. It wasn't as, deadly as Hurricane Katrina, but people were in their attics, people were, people lost their homes, right? And
Probably traumatized and had PTSD.
yeah, exactly. I mean, like every August I have PTSD. But I think that what was different was definitely, cell phones. My friends and I always talk about how Hurricane Katrina would have been different had we had cell phones and social media in the way that we have right now, right? And I think that we would have been able to show the world this is how we are being treated, right? This is like, I think that there would have been some form of self-advocacy rather than just allowing the local and national news and like the local and national federal government to tell our stories and like and like do those checkups, right? So for example, like last year, because of cell phone footage and because survivors and people who were stuck in their attics had cell phones, they were able to tweet, hey, I'm stuck in my attic in this neighborhood, I need help. So they were able to get some form of help in some cases. But what's interesting is that last year it was still a slow response from the local and federal government when it came to helping us. So it's like, yeah, like the cell phones helped in a way to like bring awareness and visibility, but it didn't put fire under the local and federal government to like help us out any quicker. So that just tells me it's not about any of that at all. It's about empathy. It's about seeing us as human and and like being there for us when we need, because like we can get as many cell phones, as many advancements on technology to to advocate for ourselves, but without empathy and like if we're still being treated in a inhumane way, those things mean nothing because it just boils down to us helping ourselves at the end of the day. And there's only so much that we can do for ourselves, right?
Can you talk about
that comment is what you wanted us to see?
Oh, he's trying to show me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was asking him something.
Oh, okay.
So, can you talk about that empathy? Because one of the things that really struck us, and I hear Dr. Pamela Pugh talk about this a lot, is talking to people. She was talking to someone, and the person said she had met one of the buses, and the person said something about I'm happy to be back in America or something. We were getting reports. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't see any live stream or Facebook lives, but we were hearing how people were treated
and called refugees.
And refugees. And how can you be a refugee in your own country?
Right. Exactly.
Treated so poorly. Can you talk about any of that you saw, that you heard, that when you were doing when you were interviewing people?
Yeah, that was a big one right there, refugees.
Right.
Soledad O'Brien and I actually had a conversation for Time Magazine, and we talked about that a lot because she was one of the, I guess like reporters who corrected that narrative when we kept being called refugees. And at the time I didn't really know what that meant. Like, I remember in school, teachers and students, would call us that, and sometimes that would cause fights. Cause fights. And just like as a because like we're not refugees. Like I think that when you call us refugees, it's lazy and it's offensive, and it also puts the ball in our court. But I think that a way to correct that is y'all are treating American citizens as if they are refugees. Exactly. Now that puts the ball in your court, right? So but and like what's funny, no, not funny, what's interesting right now, when I first made Katrina Babies and I was on my press run, people were still using that term. Like, you know, I had to correct that term a lot. Like people were still, you know, like in like Q&As and like in articles, they would, you know, frame questions and still use the term refugee. And I'm like, yo, we were not refugees. Like we are American citizens, right?
Right.
And
how dare you?
We're from
How
the great
dare
state
you?
of Louisiana. Like, come on.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and, you know, you make me think because you were talking about the technology that's available to us, and so you could at least say, "This is where I am." People would not have gotten lost like they did. But
Oh yeah.
it made me think about Flint because I told them, I said, "You pay attention to what's going on because if this is what can be done to us under a national spotlight, think of what they do
when they think nobody's watching."
exactly."
Oh yeah, and like there's so many, and you know, I think that that's why I'm just drawn to like, you know, what's happening in Flint, because there's so many parallels. When we were all at the performance of the Water Remembers, you know, when I introduced myself to the artists, you know, one of them was like, you know, y'all were first, you know, like y'all were the first water crisis, right? And you know, there's so many parallels between Hurricane Katrina and like what's currently happening in Flint and both in New Orleans. You know, I think that, you know, it's interesting that like most of the world, and it's why I am so excited that I went to that, you know, performance, but most of the world for a while thought and still thinks that the water crisis is fixed in Flint.
Exactly.
Right? You know, because
they
of
wanted
like
to be quiet. They wanted us to be silent. And that was one of the issues when I was mayor.
I was gonna say, and if you're speaking out about it, oh, you got to go.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, and you know, I think that like many people thought that, you know, because of like a series of events that happened where like, you know, it seemed validated. Okay, like Flint is good now. Like, you know, Flint is great. We don't have to worry about it anymore. And like, you know, it was something that like, you know, I think that it was some artist, like maybe it was Jay-Z, but like, you know, he was like, you know, when it's not on the nightly news no more, like suddenly it doesn't matter to you no more. You know what I'm saying? So, and like, I think that they use that as a tool as well, so that, you know, people could just think, okay, like it's done, and like, and they'll put a bandage on it. But I think that there are people who are going to reap this for real are the children. And like, that's why I decided to focus on the children, you know, for, you know, Hurricane Katrina, because they have to carry the weight of Hurricane Katrina, the trauma, the sickness that, you know, that all comes with it. And like, I'm pretty sure that it's the same for, you know, what's happening in Flint. Like they have to grow up with these, like, you know, compromised, you know, immune systems at a very young age, and like carry the trauma, and like, you know, carry like, you know, what's happening like with the lid. But something else that's important is that they have to carry this feeling of feeling neglected by their government. So like, what does that do to you? Like, you know, like if your life doesn't matter to like to your country, you know, how can it matter to you? So I think that, you know, I've heard stories about, you know, just like the crime, you know, and the violence that's happening in Flint, and like, and there's a lot of crime and violence happening in New Orleans. Like last year, we were the murder capital, right? So, and children are in front and behind, you know, the crimes, and like, and I just can't help but shake that the complex trauma has a lot to do with that. You know, it's not just because we're violent, right?
And that's what we talked about, because we're seeing the impact now, because when we think about how young they were and then and where they are now, and it's like, and we kept telling them, I said, we're going to see increased special education rates. We're going to see more of our young people in the juvenile justice system. There's going to be a need for more mental health services, and it went on and on.
Talking about the need for specialty courts,
exactly,
for kids who had experience,
but they just get listed. You know, we're told they're bad kids.
Yep,
they're bad kids, like you were saying, and we see that over and over and over again.
Those kids who were, you know, those that were babies during the water crisis, they're now like becoming teenage. Well, when the water crisis started,
right,
are now becoming teenagers. When, you know, they were formula fed with some of that water.
With that water, exactly. You know, we brought that performance, The Water Remembers, to Flint, because what's so sad about that was, I'm thinking, why am I in Ann Arbor watching this? Why am I doing this performance? And it's not that it doesn't need to go around, but we're in Flint and we're coming to Ann Arbor to see it. And when I said that, they said, well, we were in Flint, but it did not get promoted at all because they don't want us to talk about our what we've been through and tell our story of what happened to us. And so I didn't even, I said, I mean, I know I don't know everything going on in Flint, but good grief. It seems like we would have heard about that, but we didn't. And if one of the performers had not inboxed me and asked me to come, we wouldn't have been there that day. And it was so funny because I said, I get tired of, we do these same rituals on Martin Luther King Day that are really not that meaningful because the next day we go back to, and I said, I'm going to do something different. And when we saw that, I said, Jameca, I don't know what to expect from the performance, but let's go.
I was like,
and we went,
going.
and we were
don't know what
so
it is,
happy that we went.
Yeah.
I was moved.
It was so moving.
Yeah, like it was so moving, and it was important. Like something that, like you just said, made me think about my 7-year process of making Katrina babies and how, I don't want to say that it was swept under the rug, but it was like kind of ignored by certain entities in New Orleans, like definitely by like the big platforms and like the local government. It was never really, my whole project was self-funded by me, up until year 6 when HBO came on board. And that was like one of the reasons that I was so happy that, I was able to go so big with this project, because it's like, okay, now y'all can't ignore it, right? Like y'all can't sweep this like under the rug because this is on a national platform, this is getting, national visibility. So, like you can't ignore it. And like, I think that that's definitely like, I think one of the methods, like when we start advocating for ourselves, we get swept, we get pushed away. And, that's why like it was just so important for me to just go big with this project, because now, it's going to be clear who doesn't want this to happen and like who's like, on, like on our side. Right.
Right.
Who's on our side. And I know it, but you know what? There was another quote, and I can't remember it, that came out of that time, because we talked about the one Kanye West said. But you remember Barbara Bush?
Oh yeah, like
at the Dome.
Yeah, like she said something about
they're
living
here,
like they're happier here, and like they're living better than like they lived before. I was like, what? In a dome?
Right.
In a shelter.
In a shelter. The refugees are happier here.
But that's how, but that's how they see us.
Right.
That was that was George Bush's wife, right?
Yes.
That was the wife of our head of the country.
Exactly.
So like if she's saying that, now it makes sense why his response was so slow and minimal, why he flew over New Orleans and like got his photo op.
Right.
So like again, empathy, right? Like it all goes back to empathy and like seeing us as human.
You make me think. I remember, Jameca, when I first got to City Hall and we were talking about the water and the water being poisoned and what it was doing. And the governor had all of his people in office. And I remember saying, where are the people with a heart? I'm walking through City Hall because Snyder had put all of his people in place. And I'm thinking, we're being poisoned. Our kids are being damaged. Women are losing babies. People's immune systems are being compromised. We know what this means. And I kept saying, where are the people with a heart? Because they weren't there. Because if they'd been there, that they would have been working very hard to change that narrative quickly. And it just didn't happen, because 9 years later, our pipes have not been completed. They haven't finished changing the pipes. People's indoor plumbing and fixtures and appliances have not been taken care of. We're looking at the fallout of what's going on with our young people. We've seen, and some of them have lost caretakers as a result of this, because we had grown-ups that did die from Legionnaires, that did die from pneumonia. We have people dealing with depression and anxiety and PTSD, just like, what's going on there in New Orleans. It's still impacting, and people are still traumatized.
And then layer a global pandemic on top of that.
And that's what we
the
said.
part.
We were
You know,
right, we've
Yeah.
already been poisoned and
and,
compromised, and now here
traumatized.
and when they would give the stats around COVID, we said stop saying Genesee County, just say Flint, because most of the numbers were Flint. They were,
Yeah.
I mean, most of those numbers were Flint, and we knew why, because we'd already been through, like you
Well,
said,
what?
the first trauma.
And you have
Complex
people
trauma.
whose lungs were compromised because of Legionnaires and drinking that water, and
And
they
you
are
all are wading through poisoned, dirty
and
water
Yahweh,
and
yeah,
taking that,
and
taking that in.
and all that, and
Yeah.
just consuming that, getting that into your system, and then now, with COVID, no, it's no wonder people come
Yeah.
on, people are getting as sick as they were. You're already compromised,
Yeah.
and
Mentally, emotionally, physically. I mean, all of
right.
those
And
ways.
don't get
Yeah.
me started on the fact that when you experience trauma after trauma, like your trauma is stressful.
Yeah.
Oh no, it's no wonder people, get sicker during things like that.
Yeah. And it's
Our donuts or
yeah,
whatever.
like it's just complex trauma. I think her name is Dr. Joyce DeGruy. Like, like she speaks on that a lot, just
Mhm.
like complex trauma and like, just like, it's just like trauma after trauma after trauma. Like every time like a new trauma happens, like we are like the most vulnerable because of the previous trauma.
Exactly.
Like,
Exactly.
I always say like, Hurricane Katrina like just isn't like a act of this storm, right? Because like let's be honest, like many people don't know this, but New Orleans got missed by Hurricane Katrina, right? Like we didn't get hit by Hurricane Katrina, right? We got missed. It was the compromised levees and like it was the lack of it was the lack of help and support, and like it was a slow response that we
Yes.
fell victim to, so
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is a little known fact. The
yeah.
people, you people don't realize that.
Yeah, like
Failure of government.
Mhm.
yeah, like Hurricane Katrina didn't actually hit New Orleans.
Right.
Like, it was the levees that broke, from yeah,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
Mhm.
How
yeah.
how was it for you to make this film, to do this? I mean, it had to be difficult for you emotionally to do that, but it could also be like the one young lady said, it was healing to be able to tell the story.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was a range of emotions, I would say, because you know, when I first set out to make the film, I just wanted to draw parallels between, Hurricane Katrina and what was happening, in New Orleans, with young people. Like
Mhm.
I just wanted to make the point that Hurricane Katrina had impacted us, but I didn't realize that I would be carrying such a story and like, just like so many things that like um that we were dealing with that that dated back to years before Hurricane Katrina,
Mhm.
like that dated back to when my parents were children, right? And once I realized that, that's when like the weight became heavy. And it but something that kept me going and like something that gave me fuel was, hearing how strong my peers and my family were. And like, hearing how the conversations that I was having with them was the first time that they ever had that conversation,
Wow.
and that it caused some sort of healing. So like that kept me going, right?
Mhm.
But it's like, I definitely felt empowered making this film, but naturally it took like a big toll on me because this is my life, like this is my community, this is my family, like these are my friends. So, that naturally took a toll on me, but I'm glad that I did it because like now, things aren't perfect, but at least we told our story, and like now I can see like certain things being corrected. When it comes to us, right? And although sometimes it seems like the government hasn't caught on yet, I do know that this film is doing like work and like it is impact. But yeah, it took a big toll on me. Again, I was 20 I was 20 years old when I got this idea. I was 22 or 23 when I physically started to work on it, and I finished the project at 30. So that's all of my 20s. So,
Right.
being, young and black, in your 20s is already a heavy experience. So imagine
Mhm.
topping it with a project like this, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think it
Yeah.
was so important that someone from there,
Yep.
being
Oh, yes.
Someone who was a
tells the
child.
right, tells the story.
Yes. Yeah.
Because
Oh, yeah.
so many times they wanna,
Tell
write
us.
our narrative for us
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
tell us what happened and what didn't happen and why it happened or why this didn't happen,
Mhm.
and we've gotta stop letting that
Mhm.
be
Yeah.
how our stories get told.
That was the main reason that, I wanted to make this film. Like, it's just like, I want us to see it, right? Because like many projects that came out, and again, every year there's specials and programs that'll come out about New Orleans, and like, just like updating the status of New Orleans, and its natives, and talking about how, again, we are rebuilt and like resilient. But
Mhm.
I wanted, us to update, their
Right.
world on what we were experiencing ourselves, like directly from our mouths. Like, notice that there's not too many quote unquote experts. No, no. Well, actually, like there are experts, because like we are the experts of our
Right. I was
experience,
gonna
right?
exactly.
Mhm.
But they aren't like the traditional experts. Like,
Mhm.
they aren't too many. There aren't too many. You know, like like people who are serving as like subjects to contextualize what we are saying. It's like, no, this is what we are saying, and like this is fact, and that was intentional. That was on purpose, because like, I feel like people have been contextualizing our experiences in their own way, and like, telling our narratives in their own way for the past, almost 18 years. So it was time for us to do it ourselves.
So for someone who watch, let's just say they're at home and they stumble across Katrina babies, and they watch it.
Mhm.
If you had to pick one thing that you want them to really get from your story, what is that thing that you want people to really take away from your story?
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest things is, it doesn't fall, too far from like, what our mission was about, and like what our log line was. It's just that we have to pay attention to the children. Their children, I don't want to sound corny, but like, their children are the future,
Right.
right? So, I think that how we treat children right now, and like, how we equip them with the resources and the tools that they need to heal and to address trauma that may surface later. Because many times people think, okay, that child is only 13, that child is only 9 years old. He or she doesn't understand a hurricane. He or she doesn't understand a water crisis. They don't understand, what's happening to them right now.
Mhm.
So we just ignore them and like never address it in the future, because we assume that they forgot. But I think that it's important that even if you think that that child doesn't get it at the time, that you equip them with the tools and the resources, so like later on, when they're 18, or when they're 25, or like when they're 30, or shoot, like when they're 60 and 70, right? They know how to deal with that trauma once it hits them finally, right? Because like sometimes it's different moments in their lives that may
Mhm.
trigger what happened to them when they were 9 and 10
Right.
and 13. So I think that, if, the biggest takeaway from this film is that I think that we have to see our children as human, and we have to make sure that we are, equipping them with the necessary tools and the resources to deal with their trauma that they have experienced, and their trauma that will surface later. Because if not, it's going to surface amongst all of us. It's
Right.
going to surface,
And it
in
resurfaces
society.
over and over, and you were right. I mean,
Yeah,
it makes you think about when you're dealing with grief and loss, and people think, "Well, that was this number of years ago," but there are things that trigger you,
yes,
and,
Mhm.
you get back into that sadness or that depression or
Mhm.
anxiety and frustration around what happened, and it can be so
yeah,
unexpected sometimes. You
Mhm.
didn't
yeah,
expect whatever just happened to take you back there, but it does,
Mhm.
and
yeah.
get recognized often, and it's just I don't know what's wrong with that person. Something's wrong with them. They're crazy. They're this, they're that. And no, it's the trauma of what they've been through and what we've had to deal through and go through. What is that? 5 minutes? We've got Mickey's telling us we have 5 minutes. That's what that meant. And actually Mickey was with us too when we came to the performance down there in Ann Arbor.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was excited to meet you and to hear what you had done. And I just thought, wow, that's really something. But we talk about it's time for us to tell our own story and to tell our narrative. And the fact that you did all that, that you did that.
You did that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
I'm happy that you did it. So I want to thank you for doing it. I want to thank you for telling your own story. I want to thank you for not waiting for someone else to come tell your story. And as a young man, 20 years old,
Right.
that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's a heavy lift because it's a story you shouldn't have to tell. But
Yes.
so thank you for
Yeah.
doing that, and thank you for sharing your story with the rest of us.
But tell people again, if they have not seen Katrina Babies, where do they go to watch this?
Yes. So right now it is on HBO Max. Wait, sorry. Well, actually, it's on Max because HBO Max is no longer. It's on HBO. And it's on their streaming platform called Max. And you can also just watch it on on their local listing, HBO. But you would have to I think research what times it comes on and everything. But right now you can watch it on Max.
Okay, you all hear that? And it's something that, I mean, you need to go and watch this. You need to go and watch this.
Yep, everybody should watch it. But if you're in Flint, you definitely should watch it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because and that's why I think it's so important that we connect the dots with each other.
We do want you to come to Flint.
Right, we do want
I
you.
know.
We do want you.
Okay, we're going to talk about that offline.
Yeah. Like maybe doing some some sort of screening, and then a conversation could be good.
That's what we're going to do.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
With you, because that's what we're gonna do.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be great. Yep, everybody needs to watch this film. Is there anything else you want to say before we're off?
No, that's it. Thank y'all so much for having me again. I think that there are so many important conversations and parallels to be had. I mean, so many conversations to be had, and so many parallels between New Orleans and Flint. So I'm glad that y'all are keeping these conversations alive, and and I hope that many more conversations and projects and just awareness is being brought to Flint and the community, because I'm seeing firsthand how telling our own story can bring us some sort of peace and impact. So I'm wishing the same for Flint.
Thank you. And I want to have a conversation about you as a young Black male and being a filmmaker too. I mean, that's something. So we have to have that conversation as well, because sometimes people don't know what they can do until they do it, and you have a story with that too. So
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And most of the time that's what you need, story, and most of the time, I always say, I don't know if I didn't grow up in New Orleans, if I didn't experience Hurricane Katrina, and I didn't experience so much grit and struggle, I wonder what type of artist I would be, so I just hope, and sometimes it's hard, but I just hope that the young people of Flint could see past their circumstances, and not in full and not in total, but enough to at least tell their own stories and create their own art, because sometimes art can be a subtle way that could bring awareness. So I met a young woman at the performance, and she was telling me that she was working on some projects about Flint. So let's make sure that is.
We're gonna make sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds good to me. Thank you so much.
For
you all go look at
and
Katrina Babies
and share this video as well. So thank you guys. Watch, share, like.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be in touch.
To you soon.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
Thanks,
you for another episode of
Black Money Matters.